Welcome to Lore Citizen, a podcast dedicated to all things Star Citizen lore. If you enjoy this, make sure that you like, subscribe, and follow all of our social medias. Without further ado, let's get started. Welcome back to Lore Citizen. It's not been a month. It's been a week. We're actually recording this a week after the last one. So,
miracles happen.
Yeah. I figured we would, we talked about the last one, and I figured, hey, if we're available the next week, we'll just record it. So, we tend to record these on Fridays. So, this will come out hopefully next Tuesday. So if you're listening to this on that Tuesday, you get double dose of Lore Citizen. And yeah, well, let's get started with introductions. Al, who are you? What do you do in Star Citizen, and where can they find you?
I am Al Garrod, aliasly also known as Old Man Al, or Old Man Al Hurston. I am a lover of starships, so I have many starships. If I was buying them today, I'd probably be using CCUs and getting ships a lot cheaper than I could have normally. But that's me. I am one of the info runners. We often have Paul on there as well, so and we discuss a whole host of things. Commonly, do things like fix my fleet. Mm-hmm. Execute and I have been doing a Friday live stream where we'll either play yesterday. Well, for us it's Friday, so a Thursday live stream for everyone in the States. Mm-hmm. Yesterday we looked at the Q&A for the Expanse and gave what we thought the answers were, and then just chatted to people. But we also do Fix My Fleet and other shows as well. So
that's actually a really good info runners coming up, which is a conversation with Sandy Gardner, which is going to be an interesting.
Yes, there is that. That was quite fun, looking at the origins of CIG and also talking just things like what's her favorite ship, mm-hmm. what's her profession, what does she want to do, who's the best pilot, do they multi-crew, the whole gamut of things to look forward to. So
yeah. I think by the time this episode comes out, it'll have already been going there. So go watch that Info Runners episode. It's
I think the first one is due to come out the day that this one will come out. So yeah,
oh,
it'll
really?
probably have,
okay.
Yeah, so I think we're looking at Tuesday. So
okay, well, I know it's on. I know it's on the
next week anyway.
Yeah, next week. So watch it. Just go subscribe to the Info Runners and watch that when you get a chance to. And
yeah, that's right. It's going to be premiered. So
yeah, Jale, who are you? What do you do in Star Citizen, and where can they find you?
Jale, mostly known for getting overly invested in alien languages. I can mostly be heard here. I have still got a few projects that I'm quietly working on, but can't make any promises that you're going to see anything soon. And you can find me on Twitter as well. I do have a YouTube channel. Occasionally there might be something up there, but yeah, I'm doing some making projects at the moment, and I'm looking forward to sharing those with people.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm hoping we get to see your alien languages side come out during Alien Week this week, or I guess yeah, it's just Alien Week this week. This year.
I always imagine that Jale's part of the diplomatic corps. He's it's the UAE diplomatic corps.
As we're going to find out, they turned down Addison's pick for ambassador to the Xi'an Empire, and I am still available. So
and you probably are among the citizens, apart from Britain. You're probably one of the better Xeon linguists that we've got, from at least my take, anyway.
You mean one of the
only? I was being generous to anyone else who's trying to learn. The
problem with learning any constructed language is that you can only speak it with the other people who learn said constructed languages. But
so you and Britain are basically good mates.
Yeah, it's a good set of folks, but it is a small pool of conversationalists.
I was going to say that it's I think we all can agree, because we're all lore people, and that small pool is very small as well.
Yeah, that's like a subgroup of the subgroup. So
all right, well, as we talked about last week, the topic that we were going to cover is, last week we talked about the in fiction stories. So stories which were fiction in the Star Citizen universe. The serialized fiction is what they call it on the website. And it's just tons of those things. But those are not canon, meaning all those stories did not happen in the Star Citizen universe. They're great flavor, so you can kind of get the idea of what the Star Citizen universe is like, but they're not lore. What we're talking about today are canon. Go ahead.
It's catch-22 because they are lore in a sense that they are in verse. They do exist in verse, but they're the stories that the citizens of the verse would read and enjoy and do things. So they're lore, but they're not lore. It's the fiction that the citizens enjoy and do, but it gives a flavour of the types of things they like and the types of things that are popular. But what we're looking at today, as Paul says, is actually the proper stuff, the actual stuff that's happening. It's not flavoured with fiction. It's, well, depends on your view, but generally it's not flavoured by fiction.
It's the difference between reading a play written in ancient Greece and reading a memoir of someone from ancient Greece. It's the kind of the differences between those two. You can get a lot of information from both, but you have to look at them the different perspectives. So we're talking about the in fiction news and other sort of shows. A lot of these are shown off as transcripts for shows, or for broadcasts. Some of them are archives, like releasing of messages or journals from the advocacy or some explorers. So they run the gambit a little bit, but most of them are just, these are transcripts from a show that was broadcast on Spectrum. So with that in mind, Jale, why don't you start us off with it's Congress Now, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, I'm going to talk about Congress Now, but I think to really explain why I love Congress Now so much, I do have to think about a little bit more about that question of what does it mean to be in fiction, non-fiction, right? Because my pick is going to stand at the polar opposite end of the spectrum to in-law fiction. Because when we were covering stories like I was covering the Void Rats last time, although we know that there's certain things which are going to gel with non-fictional things, like the idea, it's in the Cathcart system, that's a real place in the game. But then there's other details, like if they mention a UES Africanus, which is the ship that was involved, did that really exist? Are they using the name of a real ship, or is that just made up for the story? You can't actually tell just from that bit of information all those details. Now, while a lot of the non-fictional works are less susceptible to this, it's still a kind of present thing, because a non-fictional work might still be a single author's opinion. They might misunderstand something. They might be trying to give a biased view. And they'll often have a singular perspective, or editorial perspective at least, which won't always be challenged. So you only get one side of a story. When you, for example, look at something like the Tavarian Wars, you'll always usually get the humanist perspective and also the propaganda lens that all of that's being represented through. Now, that's why my pick for best non-fiction is Congress Now, which is the in-law equivalent of C-SPAN or BBC Parliament or whatever you have to just look inside your government proceedings. It's just fly-on-the-wall transcriptional coverage of proceedings of the UE Senate and its associated committees. That might not sound inherently interesting, but as a framing device, it's fantastic, because you'll always be hearing directly the course of events with dissenting voices from other senators who are present. Al, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I was going to say, and that's why the law team often say this is dry and boring as hell.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. It could be as dull as dishwater if they want to just talk about things like interplanetary wheat taxation. But, of course, it's still supposed to be exciting writing. So Congress Now is often used to set up these as a platform to set up these big, consequential things and tie into other ongoing plot lines. So things like the ongoing Charon 3 Civil War is both a very interesting area of law that's fleshed out in Congress Now, but it's also giving you that framing device that the gameplay designers might pick up to give us large human-on-human land battles in the future.
Yeah, and I was gonna say there's a couple of big lore, like the Congress Now is very important because it has such huge ramifications for the verse. Anything that comes in Congress Now is a fundamental shift in human society, and you're looking at the absolute nitty gritty. My favorite is like, I think the Congress now, there's a Congress now where Aramis became part of the UEE, because I think that like, yeah, so like that's a huge deal, because that had implications that rippled through the entire UEE to even through Squadron 42 and today. So
yeah, and some of my favorite plot lines are there's a real ongoing thread that started back in 2014, but has been kind of peppered continuously, which is the Empire's evolving relationship with the Xi'an, which we see in other lore, but we really see in these sort of stepwise landmark decisions in Congress now. The most recent being the vote to reject the new Imperator Addison's pick for ambassador. And there's also a lot of stuff about the place of the Tavarin in the Empire, which is discussed, and is also, again, used to sort of tease potential gameplay ideas of, or gameplay storylines of like a resurgent Tavarin remnant that might be out there. So if you enjoy lore for its own sake as well, it's naturally just going to be a linchpin of that whole political lore and its memorable characters. So the Imperatorial candidate Myra No was a pretty regular character who shows up in Chorus now, and the Tavarin senator, the only Tavarin senator, the only alien senator, Suj Kossi, has made a good number of appearances. So they do make other appearances, particularly in like standalone coverage of political debates or election campaigns outside of Congress. But I think you get a very different sense of people when they're on the campaign trail versus when they're actually in the business of governance, and the sort of mask is down a bit.
The other thing that I remember that Congress now does as kind of that lead-in is it also prefaces the introduction of new laws. So Congress now is the group that's actually debating the laws and making the decisions on the laws. So you're often seeing that tease of the way that not only the UE is changing, but also the way the laws are changing and the taxes are changing, and questions of should Archangel Project or SynthWorld be continued? Should we have a Tavarin senator? All of those issues do get raised at a law level, and that kind of gets covered in Congress now, which is always an interesting, although albeit sometimes dry reading.
I don't think it's dry at all, really, because I mean,
yeah, you know what I mean, but that
it's political.
I mean, like
factual.
It is political. It is political, but it's I think it's quite rambunctious, really. It's usually kind of the best bits. When they have more boring things like trade negotiations, those are usually reported through like other things like the news program Kaizen, rather than showing the actual debates through Congress Now. But in conclusion, if you want to get a top-down sense of how the world of Star Citizen is structured and run, there's not really a better place to start than Congress Now. And some particular entries that I'd recommend are the mediation hearing of Charon 3 and the subsequent emergency session. It's 2 articles back-to-back about the Charon 3 war. The Kossi Amendment, which really delves into some of the characteristics of the political parties and the position of Tavarin in the verse. And the whole Xi'an section is great, but there was the Toral aggregate testimony has elements of actual Xi'an language that I translated on live stream, and you can find that on my channel. And yeah, I think it's just a great place to start if you want to get that kind of into that level of what's going on.
I also would heavily recommend the Crusader. I don't remember the name of it. I think it's Crusader Industries discussion, because there is a Congress Now where they're talking with the CEO Jan Dredge of Crusader Industries about crime in the Stanton system, because that's the other thing that's been pull through of most of Congress Now is crime is on the rise in the Stanton system, and that worries the Congress or the Senate, because this is exactly what happened with Nexus, where like a company was given an entire system. They kept saying, "Hey, are you taking care of the crime situation?" They're like, yeah. And then they finished what they were doing with the system. They left all of this criminal elements who had been slowly building to the system, to the point where Nexus became this huge headache for the military and the law enforcement. It required an invasion. It's the whole basis of like the theaters of war map we know. And as a result, like the Senate is looking at Stanton and seeing the rise in crime rates because players are there, because it's the only system we have. and they're wringing their hands because they're like, this is Nexus all over again, but it's worse because they're not actually paying attention. And there's a great section in that which references Jumptown. It is the lore piece that canonized Jumptown as an event in lore, which is pretty cool. It's
And I'll point out that everyone, all the players, always bag out how bad Hurston are, and how evil they are, and how they push the workers down and keep them downtrodden. And yet, where is law and order best manifest and held in the Stanton system? On Crusader. Where is it worst? On those lovely, touchy-feely areas like, Crusader with, they can't even keep Correa, they can't even keep Grim Hex, so that's where the problems are, and yet everyone hates, all the players hate Hurston, So I just got to tell you, Paulie, we just got to stop that.
Thank you, old man Hurston. Thank you for your opinion.
Yeah, I hope I've sold some people on it though, because I think it's the hardest concept to sell before you've read it. Why would you want to read transcripts of political proceedings? But I think some of the some really excellent writing shines through in it as well. So it's really worthwhile place to dip your toes.
I remember reading one passage where there was about to be a fight in Congress. I forgot who it was between. I think it was between Mir Nago and somebody else, because it was definitely a centrist and a transitionalist, because they basically were insulting the transitionalist as being soft on crime or soft on aliens, and the transitionalist responded with being like, yeah, well, I'm not a racist. And the centralist let's go right now in this courtroom right here. And it the chairman's all right, we got to calm this down and kind of do this, because it was excuse me.
That was the excuse for the racist, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think the line was, we'll reconvene when the Senate can find its decorum once more, or something like that. It was very kind of Speaker of the House.
Yeah.
Politesse. It was that's the one. I think it's called Amendment 27, which is a sort of tongue-in-cheek reference, I think, to some other amendments in the real world which are kind of exclusionary and stuff, and euphemistically call them the it's actually no, the fight isn't at the end of the Amendment 27 one, but that's the one where they get really into xenophobia and stuff.
Yeah, that was the one where they were basically trying to ban Sujkosi from being able to take his seat as senator, because they're we can't let non-humans into the Senate, and basically
because the law kind of says,
the universalists and the transitionalists together were just basically nah, shut up, centralists.
They're like, oh, we're not trying to ban just that guy, we're trying to ban all aliens. It's not personal. It's there's only one alien here.
He's literally the only one we've ever had.
But that's a thin edge of the wedge. We let one in, and then we'll all come in. So it was that type of, But I think they were also arguing that it was part of the law that only humans could be on the Senate, and we've only ever had humans on the Senate. So of course that's kind of the. So it was that whole, we've got to change the standing orders so that we can be inclusive, and that was always the thing. And you kind of see a kind of backplay of that tied in with Leanne Addison's choice for senator. I think there are other issues with her choice of senator for Xeon.
You mean the
ambassador?
Yeah.
So it ties in with that. Oh, we can't have a Xeon as a Xeon ambassador because I think there are major issues with that. But it was kind of that same whole thing of.
Yeah. Well, I mean, thinking about the Xi'an ambassador one, I think that. I mean, the Amendment 27 one was sort of just cartoonish xenophobia. It's we hate the alien because he's an alien, and I think that the Xi'an ambassador one was a lot more nuanced, because, of course, there are good reasons not to have an ambassador who's born in the country that they're supposed to be ambassadorial for, and so it was a little bit more of a nuanced thing, because I'm one of the most alien loving people out there. Not sure that's the right person for the job in that regard. So anyway, That's probably enough about Congress now.
Yeah.
But
hopefully our discussion has proven that you should probably read Congress now if you haven't already. So I'm going to take the next reins because I'm the one who chose the choice out of the UEE. And let me pitch to you. So I'm going to pick up the big one. His name is Jester. Jester is a pirate. He runs a pirate radio station, and I mean literal pirate radio station, a pirate who runs a radio station, called B0oty Call. And B0oty Call I think it's B0 or capital O, little o, capital T, little y, capital C, capital A, capital LL. It's this weird spelling. But the reason why I think you should read B0oty Call is because it's the only perspective that we have completely without of the UEE. Everything in this is from a person who does not live in the UEE, who hates the UEE, and they give you a perspective on the universe that is unique to that perspective, which we don't really see in much of the lore. And what we see from Jester's discussions are history of piracy, how piracy has existed in the verse, how pirates are much more likely to keep their heads down rather than going loud, the amount of animosity between pirate gangs and pirate groups. It's a lot of stuff, and the unique thing about B0oty Call is that the writers tend to use B0oty Call as a means to explain game functionality. So when they were talking about, for instance, that if you're more active as a pirate, if you kill people, if you're attacking with undue ruthless force, then you will get a much higher response from the quantum system. The quanta would start to hire more security. And there's a B0oty Call section where he's basically like, if I find the guy who's been attacking my trade routes, I'm going to lynch him, because Jester talks about how he was trying to hit these convoys, but he'd always let them live. He'd be as quick as possible with it. But now some ruthless psychopath had been attacking these convoys and killing all these things. So now he had to fight. I think he had to fight across like a flight of 4 Super Hornets were escorting, and it was him and like a Cutlass and like 1 or 2 other wingmen. He was like, I almost died. So it's like, if I find you, I'm going to skin you alive, kid, whoever you are. We also learn about things like the invasion of the Nexus system a little bit more. We learn a little bit about the Nova Riders and so the history of piracy, the Nova Riders being the first pirates ever, or the first pirates to hit transports en route, because most pirates would wait for them to land at a station and then attack them. So there's a lot of like information you can gather from Jester about the side of the game that is not UEE focused, which shows that the game, at least the game's lore, is supposed to be ruthless, bloody, but not too dissimilar from what we have, in civilized space. Just you get more with a kind word and a gun than just a kind word. And it gives you a little good perspective on that, especially with the introduction of new mechanics and how things are supposed to play out in the game through some of these. So, yeah, it's B0oty Call.
Yeah, one of the things I do like about B0oty Call is that element that you were picking up, where he says, "Look, you don't want to bring attention to yourself. You bring too much attention to us, and not only me, but all the other pirates. We're gonna be after you because you're making our lives hard. You've got it." He talks about that balance. Yeah, it's nice to get that quick payoff, but if you're doing it at the expense of the brethren, you're gonna find you don't have anywhere to sell it, or because we'll close our ports to you as well, because you're just bringing too much heat. So we don't want you coming to our safe havens if you've got the fleet after you, because we don't want to be hauled up either. So that it really does pick up that element of how as a pirate player you've got to have that balance, and it did kind of look at it being a almost dealing with the claims of griefing that players were doing in the verse of shutting down stations, of pad ramming, and all those other things that were happening in the verse, and that was kind of this inverse comment from a pirate going, "What the bleep are you guys doing?" You know. So yeah, quite like that aspect of B0oty Call.
I forgot what was the other one. I would say the other thing that's important to learn from this is that outlaws or like pirates aren't really yarhar, just going out and raiding things sort of thing in the Star Citizen universe. B0oty Call really kind of explains that pirates are kind of like counterculture. They're part pirates, yes, because they need to live, but they're much more rebels. And many of them are literally, or their origins are literally from rebel groups that failed to overthrow the various incarnations of the human government that have been pushed off into empty spaces. And a lot of them are Tavaran, because they were forced out of their homeworld and they had to live to survive. So you get to see, not just piracy, but the outlaw lifestyle, what it's like to live outside, and how, they fight each other, but they hate the UEE more than they hate each other because of what they did to them. So.
Yeah, I think I think you're right that one of the most valuable things about B0oty Call is that it's the non-UEE perspective.
Mm-hmm.
I would love to see more non-UEE perspectives. Like, for example, there's still supposed to be this sort of contingent of expatriates in on a Xi'an planet in a city called Corilla that which were like the academics who fled the messes and so forth. I'd really love if we hear from them in the same way we hear from the pirates in B0oty Call, because there are decent human populations, decently sized, as well as decent upstanding people.
Yeah.
And there's the miners in Oberon as well, who are just sort of good working folks who went out there thinking the Empire was going to come and take over their area and never did. So they just found themselves on the outside of the Empire. And I'd love to hear some more of those perspectives and those stories.
Yeah.
I also like hearing I like the story from Home Sweet Home, which was a Tavaran who'd left and went to Branna and then came back. And even though that was a Tavaran within the UEE, it was a totally different perspective. It was a Tavaran's viewpoint of what was happening in the UEE and how they were hard done by, I suppose, or ignored or experienced racism within the UEE. And yet when he went to Branna, even though he felt that freedom and acceptance, he also felt this isn't right.
Mm-hmm.
And so you kind of had you saw the divide within the Tavaran peoples as well, in that and how they struggle with being inside or outside. So anything that's not just towing the government line is always something I like.
Yeah, I was going to say that I think that's the reason why I think B0oty Call is so important. If you're a pirate in the game or you want to live in that outlaw lifestyle, this will give you the perspective on who you're dealing with on a regular basis. But also, even if you don't want to live an outlaw lifestyle, you get to see what life is like for these people. The kind of anti-establishment, anarchist, more rebel with a cause, or sometimes rebel without a cause. The interplay, the outside perspective, which we very rarely see in lore. And I think that's one of the more interesting things to take into account, is that everything you see in the lore is almost 100% from the UEE perspective, often from big corporations or the government. So you're rarely seeing the perspective of the common person or the person who's on the outside of that society. So yeah, that's what B0oty Call. Al, you have our last discussion, which is a unique one.
It's different. And the last one we're looking at is Empire Report. Now, Empire Report isn't a government organized outlet, nor is it a non-UEE outlet. It is the standard, boring, everyday, nightly news. Empire Report is a daily Spectrum news program produced by and broadcast SSN on CATV. It's a companion to their nightly news show as well. So it's kind of like the 7:30 report or the one of those investigative type reports where they kind of look at 2 or 3 issues and discuss them. It's has a regular daily time slot, and with its sister program, they don't just do the same stories. They split the stories, so they're not covering the same event. Its current hosts are Beck Rissman, Alan Nouveau, and we have a sports reporter, Colt Legrand, who talks about the Saddle and other things. What makes Empire report Paul?
Oh no, I was gonna say. I'm sure. Go ahead. I'll chip in later. Go ahead.
Okay. So what makes Empire Report unique within the Star Citizen lore is the fact that not only do we have transcripts or extracts of the show in transcript form, which appear periodically within the Spectrum, but buried in the Around the Verse episodes, we actually have the ad breaks for Empire Report telling us what was coming in that show that night. And these reports covered everything. They covered, we have political reports talking about the Tavaran senator, whose name I always forget because I Soj, whatever his last name is, because I could never remember it. Yeah, him. But it also talks about health issues. So we have issues where they talk about an outbreak of lynch fever on golf. We have reports of a senator who is trying to bring in legislation to limit the number of children you could have. So, that could answer the question, where are all the children in the verse? It deals with fashion. So what's the latest fashion and what's the latest fashion show? Also, what systems are the happiest? So they do the cultural, the societal thing. So, happiness meter, which systems have got the happiest citizens, and which are the most oppressed systems in terms of economics or other things. And they also cover, not only do they cover sport and the Saddle and where to get your tickets and all that, but they also covered aspects of the Charon Civil War. So I think it was episode 31 of Around the Verse, the first episode I could find, and I think that dealt with the Charon War, and there's about 2 or 3 other episodes that you find in the video aspects where they talk about the advent of the war, the problems in the war. And so that gave us a face. One of the things I like about the video aspect is it gave us a face to those characters as well, not just the text. So that's why I also like the Empire Report.
Yeah, I mean, it was one of the earlier ones because it's back when the Roundiverse was around. But it was nice to see a news report because I've heard lots of rumblings recently from the community that a lot of people are hoping in the future that we get some sort of broadcast in game, something you can turn on your ship and turn on and watch, like a news report or listen to interviews and stuff like that, to bring the lore into the game more than just text on a website, but hearing it, digesting this through the in-game comms. And the Empire Report is a good example of seeing like a version of that in its early forms, live action. So
yeah, broadcast, by the way, nightly, 2200 SET.
SET, Standard Earth Time. Standard Earth Time. That's what SET stands for.
I wasn't sure. I was wondering, it's Standard Empire Time, Standard Earth Time. But
Standard Earth Time. It's New York City time.
Mm-hmm.
Much to the annoyance of the Tavarans, I'm sure. Not Tavarans, the
Terrans. Oh yeah, Terrans have a completely different dating system and time system. They use their own similar things. I remember there was lots of arguments about that.
Yeah, it's one of Myron No's suggestions that planets shouldn't be legally bound to use Standard Earth time, which they currently are. They can have local times. All proper business has to be done in Standard Earth time, and it's kind of implied, seeing as they publish things, based on the current date plus 950 years, that we still have daylight savings time. So you can imagine how annoying it'd be to set your clock back an hour because you're matching the time of some weird tradition from a city on the other side of the galaxy to you.
It can also be problematic because it could mean that your government operating hours are from 2 a.m. to 4 a.m. local time. So you're in the middle of the night and you have to meet with everybody.
Oh, can you imagine that? Having to meet at midnight every time. God, that'd be so annoying.
Jale has no
Well, that's
experience
why
with
the
that
Senate
with,
is generally on Earth for us.
you know, and I'm sure
I
it's I'm sure Al has no experience with waking up at 4 o'clock in the morning to do recordings or anything like that. So
No,
I'm
no,
sure.
nothing
yeah,
like that.
I think we all got it's the least bad option, isn't it?
Yeah. I'll just finish off by saying, like, I think if you listen to any of these, if you go through any of these, you'll get a better perspective on the verse. And these are all good starting points. It's important to remember that if you're looking for these yourself, go under Spectrum Dispatch under the com link. If you just hit Spectrum Dispatch com link and then hit like search, it'll bring up all of these. Some of those are not lore pieces, but you can definitely tell the difference between the lore pieces and like the patch report, you know.
Yeah, the hardest thing with Empire Report is we do have a pile of them that are in the Spectrum as text documents, but there's a pile that are buried in that are around the verse. Now, episode 49 of Around the Verse was the first one where I found that actually were putting them in the list of what was there. But the earliest episode I found was episode 31 of Around the Verse. And you go to the beginning of the episode and it plays, and it's just like an ad break before the show starts. And so, but there's like 140 odd or some ungodly number of Empire Report of Around the Verse. So buried in there are probably a dozen or so. And you've just got to dig them up if you want to watch them. So that's the biggest frustration there, but they're little gems worth digging up.
I think that's it for us. Hopefully y'all enjoyed that. I don't know when we'll be back. We'll discuss that off the recording. But it's probably going to be a little later than another week. We'll definitely do like probably some special around Invictus and Alien Week, so we can talk a little bit more about the various specials, especially since a lot of the Star Citizen events are also in-game lore events. So it's always important to do that. As always, make sure if you are watching this on YouTube, like, subscribe. If you're listening to this on the podcast, give us a thumbs up. And make sure you're following Jale and Al on their social medias. Yeah, like I say every time, hope to see you someday in the black. Remember, ex Historia